The floors of the downtown office building gleamed under the fluorescent lights, the only sign of life in an otherwise empty space. It was nearly midnight, and Hector, the janitor, was finishing up his shift. His back ached from hours of scrubbing, and his mind was heavy with worry. His rent was due, and his daughter's school fees were piling up. He had no one to turn to, and each passing day felt like another step toward losing everything. As he emptied the last trash bin, he heard footsteps echoing through the hallway. His heart pounded. No one should be here this late. He turned, gripping his mop like a weapon. Out of the dimly lit corridor stepped a man in a worn leather jacket, his dark hair slightly disheveled. Hector's grip loosened as he recognized the face instantly. It was Keanu Reeves. "Whoa, sorry, man," Keanu said, raising his hands in surrender. "Didn't mean to startle you." Hector blinked. He had heard the rumors. Keanu had an office in the building, using it as a quiet writing space. But what was he doing here at this hour? "No problem, Mr. Reeves," Hector said, forcing a smile. "Didn't expect anyone else here." Keanu chuckled, glancing around. "Yeah, I like working late. Fewer distractions." He eyed the mop and bucket. "Long night?" "Like every night," Hector replied, sighing. "But you know, gotta keep the floors shining." Keanu nodded, his expression thoughtful. He could sense the exhaustion in the janitor's voice, the kind of weariness that came from more than just physical labor. Hector, embarrassed by his own complaints, quickly changed the subject. "What about you? Writing another John Wick movie?" Keanu grinned. "Something like that. I find peace in working late." He hesitated for a moment before asking, "How long have you worked here?" Hector wiped his hands on his uniform. 10 years. Feels like a lifetime." Keanu frowned slightly. "And they got you working these hours?" Hector chuckled bitterly. "Gotta pay the bills, man." Keanu nodded again but didn't say anything. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulling out a worn leather wallet. Hector shook his head immediately. No, man, I wasn't complaining." "I don't need." Keanu held up a hand, stopping him. "Not what you think," he said, pulling out a folded piece of paper instead of cash. He scribbled something on it, and handed it over. "Meet me here tomorrow morning at 9, Keanu said, his voice serious now. Hector hesitated. "For what?" Keanu's eyes locked onto his. "For an opportunity." Hector looked down at the paper. It wasn't money. It was an address. Before he could ask anything else, Keanu clapped him on the shoulder. "Just trust me." And then, just like that, Keanu walked back into the shadows of the hallway, leaving Hector standing there, gripping the paper like it was a lifeline. Hector barely slept that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the scrap of paper resting on his nightstand like a secret too big to ignore. "Meet me here tomorrow at 9. Keanu's words echoed in his mind. What kind of opportunity? A new job? A charity handout? Hector wasn't the type to take free money. He had always worked for everything he had. But something about Keanu's expression, the quiet confidence in his voice, made it feel like this was more than just a Hollywood star throwing cash at a problem. By morning, Hector had made up his mind. He kissed his daughter goodbye, grabbed his work uniform, just in case this turned out to be nothing, and left for the address Keanu had written. When he arrived, his breath caught in his throat. It wasn't an office, and it sure wasn't a charity. It was a motorcycle shop. The sign above the door read Arch Motorcycle, and Hector recognized it immediately. Keanu was part owner of the company. He'd read about it in a magazine years ago. The place was famous for handcrafting high-end motorcycles, the kind that cost more than Hector made in a year. "What the hell am I doing here?" he muttered under his breath. Before he could turn around, a familiar voice called out. "Right on time." Keanu stepped out of the shop, wiping his hands on a rag. Today, he was dressed differently, jeans, work boots, and a grease-stained shirt that made him look less like a movie star and more like one of the mechanics. "Mr. Reeves?" Hector said, still unsure why he was here. "Just Keanu," the actor corrected, waving him inside. "Come on in." Hector hesitated, then followed him through the doors. The inside of the shop smelled like oil and steel, the air filled with the sound of tools clanking and soft rock music playing from an old radio. A few workers were hunched over sleek motorcycles, their hands covered in grease. "All right," Hector said finally. "I'll bite." "What's this about?" Keanu leaned against the workbench. "I heard you say you've been a janitor for 10 years. "Yeah," Hector nodded, crossing his arms. "Honest work." "No doubt," Keanu agreed. "But is it what you love?" Hector scoffed. "Love? Man, I got bills to pay. Love don't pay the rent." Keanu smiled. "Fair point." He gestured toward the motorcycles. "But if money weren't an issue, if you could do anything, what would it be?" Hector hesitated. No one had ever asked him that before. He let his eyes wander over the motorcycles, tracing the sleek lines, the custom paint jobs, the polished chrome that gleamed under the workshop lights. As a kid, he had posters of motorcycles on his bedroom wall. He used to dream of working on them, of building something with his hands instead of just cleaning up after others. But life had a way of killing dreams when survival took priority. "I used to love bikes," Hector admitted quietly. "Never had the money for one, though. And I sure as hell never learned how to build one." Keanu studied him for a long moment, then tossed the wrench onto the workbench with a clatter. "Wanna learn?" Hector blinked. "Wait, what?" Keanu grinned. "I'm offering you a job." Hector stared at him. "You serious?" Keanu nodded. "We'll train you. Start you off slow. You'll be around people who actually appreciate your work. And who knows? Maybe one day you'll build your own bike." Hector's mouth went dry. I don't know, man. I mean, I'm just a janitor." Keanu's expression turned serious. "Nah, man. You're not just a janitor. You're a hard worker. You've been busting your ass for a decade with no recognition. You show up, do the work, and don't complain. That's the kind of person I want in my shop." Hector looked down at his hands, callous from years of labor. His whole life, he had worked jobs that no one noticed, cleaning, mopping, picking up after people. But now, for the first time, someone was offering him the chance to create something. But was he good enough? Could he really learn? Keanu must have seen the doubt in his eyes because he clapped a hand on Hector's shoulder. "You don't have to say yes right now. But take a walk around the shop. Talk to the guys. See if this feels right." Hector took a deep breath. This was insane. But then again, what did he have to lose? He nodded slowly. "All right. Let's see what you got." Keanu grinned. "That's what I like to hear." And just like that, Hector took his first step towards something he never thought possible, a future that wasn't just about surviving, but about living. Hector spent the next hour wandering the shop, watching the mechanics at work. These weren't just guys turning wrenches, they were artists. Each bike was a masterpiece, a combination of raw power and elegant craftsmanship. The way they spoke about the machines, their hands moving with confidence and precision, it was like watching musicians play an instrument they had mastered long ago. A mechanic named Luis, a stocky man with tattooed arms, noticed Hector watching and smirked. "Never seen a bike up close before?" Hector chuckled. "Not one like this." He ran his fingers over the smooth gas tank of a half-built motorcycle. "I used to dream about riding one of these when I was a kid." Luis nodded knowingly. "Yeah, bikes got that effect on people. They make you feel free." Keanu, who had been watching from a few feet away, leaned against the workbench. "That's why we build them." Hector turned to him, still struggling to believe all of this was real. "I don't know, man. I've never done anything like this before." Luis wiped his hands on a rag. "Neither did I when I started. Keanu gave me a shot. Now I get paid to do what I love." Hector raised an eyebrow. "Wait, you weren't always a mechanic?" Luis shook his head. "Nah, man. I was working at a loading dock, breaking my back for pennies. Keanu came in one day, saw I was into bikes, and asked if I wanted to learn. Best decision I ever made. Hector turned back to Keanu. You make a habit of giving guys like us a chance? Keanu shrugged. I just believe in hard workers. Doesn't matter where you come from. If you're willing to learn, you deserve an opportunity. Hector looked down at his hands. Could he really do this? Before he could talk himself out of it, Keanu tossed a wrench onto the workbench. All right, Keanu said. Let's see what you got. Hector hesitated. Now? No better time than the present. Keanu nodded toward a motorcycle frame sitting on a lift. This one's still in the early stages. Perfect for learning. Luis handed Hector a pair of gloves. You ever take apart an engine? Hector laughed. Man, I barely know how to change my oil. Luis grinned. Good. That means you won't have any bad habits we gotta fix. The other mechanics chuckled, but it wasn't mocking. It was welcoming. They weren't looking down on him, they were inviting him into their world. Keanu stood beside Hector, handing him a tool. All right, first things first, let's loosen these bolts. Hector exhaled and took the wrench. Here goes nothing. The first few hours were rough. Hector was used to cleaning up other people's messes, not building something from scratch. His hands fumbled, his movements were awkward, and he felt painfully slow compared to the experienced mechanics. But Keanu never rushed him. Instead, he explained each step, his voice calm and patient. You don't have to muscle it, Keanu said, guiding Hector's hands as he worked on the bolts. Let the tool do the work. Hector adjusted his grip. The bolt finally loosened. See? Keanu grinned. You're getting it. As the day went on, Hector found himself forgetting his doubts. He focused on the metal, the tools, the satisfying clicks and clanks as parts came apart and went back together. Luis patted him on the back after he successfully reassembled a brake system. Not bad for a janitor. Hector smirked. Not bad for a teacher. By the time the sun began to set, Hector was exhausted, but for the first time in a long time, it was the good kind of tired. Keanu clapped him on the back. You did good today, man. Hector wiped sweat from his forehead. I feel like I did everything at half speed. Keanu chuckled. Speed comes with experience. You showed up, you tried, and you didn't quit. That's all that matters. Hector looked around the shop, then back at Keanu. So, what now? Keanu crossed his arms. Now? You come back tomorrow. Hector blinked. Wait, that's it? Just like that? Keanu grinned. You keep showing up, we'll keep teaching you. Hector looked around the shop again, the smell of oil and metal filling his lungs. Could this really be his new life? He thought about his daughter. How different would her future look if her father wasn't just some janitor cleaning floors at night, but a mechanic building motorcycles for one of the best shops in the country? For the first time in years, Hector felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. He nodded. All right. I'll be here. Keanu smiled. Looking forward to it. As Hector stepped out into the cool evening air, he realized something. For the first time in 10 years, he wasn't dreading tomorrow. He was excited for it. The next morning, Hector woke up before his alarm, something he hadn't done in years. He lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, feeling something strange in his chest, excitement. Not the nervous kind he felt before another exhausting night shift, but real excitement, the kind he hadn't experienced since he was a kid. His daughter, Sophia, peeked into his room, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Papa? You're awake already? She asked, surprised. Hector chuckled. Yeah, Mija. Got a new job. Her eyes widened. A real job? He hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, a real job. She smiled sleepily. That's cool. Then she yawned. Can I still help you clean on weekends? Hector's heart clenched. Sophia had always tried to help him with little things, folding towels, sweeping their small apartment, pretending to work, when he came home exhausted from his shifts. He had always hated that. A 9-year-old shouldn't have to feel like part of the workforce. He ruffled her hair. Nah, princessa. You focus on school. I got this. As he made breakfast, he glanced at the janitor uniform hanging by the door. It had been his second skin for 10 years. Now, it felt like a weight he was finally taking off. By 9 a.m., Hector was back at Arch Motorcycle, stepping into the shop with a mix of excitement and nerves. The other mechanics were already working, the sound of power tools humming through the air. A radio played classic rock, filling the space with energy. Keanu, dressed in jeans and a faded t-shirt, greeted him with a smile. Look who actually showed up. Hector smirked. You thought I wouldn't? Keanu shrugged. A lot of people get an opportunity and don't take it. You did. That says something. Luis tossed Hector a pair of gloves. All right, rookie. Time to get your hands dirty. Hector expected the second day to be easier than the first. It wasn't. His fingers ached from gripping tools the wrong way. His arms were sore from lifting heavy parts. His back screamed at him every time he bent down to adjust a component. But he didn't quit. Keanu and Luis guided him through everything: how to install a suspension, how to adjust the clutch, how to handle delicate custom parts without damaging them. Slow and steady, Keanu reminded him as Hector struggled to attach a gas tank to the frame of a half-built motorcycle. I got it, Hector grunted, trying to hold it steady. Keanu smirked. Yeah, but will it stay on when someone's going 100 miles per hour down the highway? Hector froze. Keanu chuckled. It's all about precision, man. No rush. Get it right. By the time lunch rolled around, Hector was exhausted. He sat outside on a bench, peeling an orange while Luis chugged a bottle of water next to him. Man, this is harder than cleaning floors, Hector admitted. Luis laughed. Yeah, but no one treats you like you're invisible here, huh? Hector thought about that. No one had asked him about his night, his life, his thoughts, when he was just a janitor. But here, in just 2 days, Keanu and these guys had treated him like he belonged. He looked at the half-built bike inside the shop. For the first time in years, he was building something instead of just cleaning up after people. Keanu stepped outside, tossing Hector a water bottle. How you feeling? Sore, Hector admitted. Keanu grinned. Good. Means you're learning. For the next 2 weeks, Hector showed up every single day. He learned how to install brakes, how to handle wiring, how to polish and paint without ruining the finish. He was getting better. But one evening, when most of the guys had gone home, doubt crept in. Hector was alone in the shop, staring at a disassembled motorcycle engine in front of him. He had been trying to follow Keanu's instructions, but no matter what he did, he couldn't get the damn thing back together. He sighed in frustration, wiping sweat from his forehead. This was a mistake, he muttered under his breath. I don't belong here. A voice behind him spoke. That's bullshit. Hector turned. Keanu was standing in the doorway. The actor walked over, grabbing a nearby stool and sitting down next to Hector. You're gonna let one bad night convince you that you don't belong? Hector clenched his fists. Man, look at me. I'm not like you guys. I'm not a mechanic. I've never built anything in my life. Keanu leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Neither had I. Hector frowned. What? Keanu smiled. I didn't know a damn thing about motorcycles when I started Arch. I just loved them. I wanted to build something, so I found the right people and learned. He tapped a finger against his temple. You think I didn't mess up 100 times? You think I didn't feel like a fraud? Hector looked down at the engine. Yeah, but you're Keanu Reeves. You can do anything. Keanu chuckled. Nah, man. I just don't quit. He picked up a wrench and handed it to Hector. You already did the hardest part, you showed up. Now finish what you started. Hector looked at the tool in his hand, then back at Keanu. He sighed. All right. Let's try again. That night, under Keanu's guidance, Hector rebuilt his first motorcycle engine. By the time they finished, it was past midnight. The shop was quiet, just the two of them sitting in the glow of the overhead lights. Keanu wiped his hands on a rag and smiled. Told you. Hector stared at the finished engine. He had done it. Not alone, but still, he had done it. And for the first time in a long time, he believed he could do more. Keanu clapped a hand on his shoulder. Go home, man. Get some sleep. You earned it. Hector looked around the shop one last time before heading out. Tomorrow, he wouldn't just be the janitor who got lucky. He would be a mechanic in training. And for the first time in years he was proud of himself. The weeks turned into months, and Hector transformed. He wasn't just a janitor learning to build motorcycles anymore, he was becoming a mechanic. At first, he still felt like an outsider, but as he worked beside Luis, Keanu, and the rest of the team, something shifted. He no longer second-guessed himself with every bolt he tightened or every part he installed. He trusted his hands, trusted his instincts. And people noticed. One evening, as he finished polishing a brand-new, custom-built arch motorcycle, Luis leaned against the workbench and smirked. You know, Luis said, you're not the rookie anymore. Hector chuckled. Yeah? Then what am I? Luis tossed him a key. Hector caught it, confused. Your test ride. Keanu's voice cut in from behind him. Hector turned, eyes widening. Wait, what? Keanu gestured to the motorcycle in front of them, a stunning black and chrome beauty that Hector had helped build from the ground up. You've been working on bikes for months, Keanu said. Now it's time to ride one. Hector's heart pounded. He had spent so much time working on motorcycles, but the truth was, he had never ridden one. I don't know, man, Hector admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. I don't want to mess it up. Keanu stepped forward, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. Hector, he said, you built this bike. That means you already know it better than anyone. Hector swallowed hard. Keanu tossed him a helmet. Let's ride. The night air was crisp and electric as Hector straddled the motorcycle, his hands gripping the handlebars. His pulse raced as he adjusted his helmet. Keanu sat on his own bike beside him, revving the engine. Just follow my lead. Hector took a deep breath, turned the key, and felt the machine come to life beneath him. The vibration, the raw power, it sent a chill up his spine. Keanu nodded. Ready? Hector hesitated, then nodded back. Yeah. And with that, they took off. The first few seconds were terrifying. Hector wobbled slightly as he adjusted to the throttle, but then, as they rolled onto the open road, something clicked. The wind rushed past him, the city lights blurred in his peripheral vision, and suddenly, all the weight he had carried for years, the stress, the exhaustion, the doubt, vanished. For the first time in his life, Hector felt free. Keanu glanced over, grinning. How's it feel? Hector couldn't stop laughing. This is incredible. Keanu nodded. Told you. They rode for an hour, through the winding streets, past the city skyline, out to the open highway where the world stretched wide before them. Hector never wanted it to end. When they finally pulled back into the shop, Hector took off his helmet, his face beaming. That, he panted, was the best damn thing I've ever done. Keanu clapped him on the back. Welcome to the club. The next day, Hector walked into the shop, expecting another normal workday. But when he entered, Keanu and Luis were waiting for him, along with the rest of the team. Luis grinned and handed Hector an envelope. Open it. Hector raised an eyebrow but tore it open. Inside was a contract. He scanned the paper, his hands shaking. Full-time mechanic. Permanent position. His throat tightened. Are you serious? Keanu nodded. You've earned it. Hector looked around the shop. The place that had once felt so foreign now felt like home. He thought about where he had been just a few months ago, cleaning floors in a building where no one knew his name. And now, he was part of something real. Tears burned at the back of his eyes, but he blinked them away. He shook Keanu's hand, then pulled him into a tight hug. Thank you, man. For everything. Keanu patted his back. Just don't crash the next bike you ride. Laughter erupted around the shop, and Hector felt it deep in his soul. He belonged here. That night, as Hector sat at his kitchen table, Sophia sat beside him, working on her homework. She looked up suddenly and asked, "Papa, are you happy?" Hector smiled, a real, deep smile. "Yeah, Mija. I am." She grinned. "I knew you would be." Hector reached into his pocket and pulled out the keys to the motorcycle he had test-ridden earlier. One day, he thought, I'll build my own bike from scratch. And when that day comes, he won't just be a former janitor, or a struggling single father. He'll be Hector Santiago, the mechanic. Because sometimes, all it takes to change your life is for one person to believe in you. And for you to finally believe in yourself.